I'll take my chance now. Uh, whether industry really encourage proactive personalities, or the industry want a person to do job which is assigned by the managers. See, proactive personality, you might be knowing very well than us. A person who think always think futuristic and be a lateral thinker. Okay, you need these kinds of people, or you need a person just to do job.
Great question. So, in theory, I think all of us keep saying, oh, we need absolutely proactive personalities who's just the go-getter, who will get it done, who'll be like, on top of everything and so on. And I think it's very important. As long as it doesn't turn out to be cocky. I think that's the difference. People definitely do appreciate people being very proactive, but it should be proactiveness not at the cost of being detrimental to a particular project. For example, I might think that there is a better way of doing it, which is great, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be doing this job, and that I should be focusing on what's the better way to get it, because what's on hand at the moment is for the job to get done. You get the job done, and then you talk about what more can be done. That is any day appreciated, and I think in most organizations people really value that, because I think what everybody is trying to see is how can they get a bigger mind share among their clients and so on. So it is definitely being recognized. I know that and these are typically your high potential people, who you call it, right? There's a high performer, high potential in the industry. It's always in the workplace, it's very confusing. It's a bit muddled. They would call a high performer high potential and vice versa and so on. But I think what's really important is that differentiation. And these are people who you would call high potential, right? There are people who can take it to the next notch. They are definitely appreciated. They go a long way. We have seen such people who made huge strides in the workplace, starting off with their peers and ending up elsewhere. I think Ravi is talking. So you're on mute.
Yeah, can you tell about a particular person? Describe him, the proactive person who was very successful.
A proactive person who was very successful. Sure. So we had one of the VPs, in Cognizant, who started off as a, as a graduate, along with others, and he was the youngest VP. I think he was made a VP in 12 years or 12, 13 years. That was it. Which was really unheard of, because it usually takes a slightly longer time. And that was primarily because he was really proactive. I think when he had that, so he was someone who set up the whole organization in China. And this was at a time when Cognizant was opening up its branch in China, and they needed someone to go there. And you had someone who put up his hands and said that I will go set it up there. And being in the right place at the right time and having that conviction to do it. And he had already, established his credibility with the leadership team as well. And he was given that opportunity, and, he really flourished, within the organization. So I think it all, but this did not come at the cost of, I will not code. I will not, I think I'm set out for higher stuff. So I shouldn't be doing this. It wasn't at that cost.
Can you describe this guy a little more? What he does not do, what he does so well? Can you tell a little more about that? To decipher his personality.
Yeah. So, it's about someone who will get the work done. Okay. I think that's the first thing, for a leadership team to be able to trust that the person will get the work done no matter what. So there's a huge result orientation that is there. Two, it is someone who is not afraid to take risk, okay, but take calculated risk. Let me put it that way. Someone who's not just out there saying, oh, I will do this, without really looking at the risk, but someone who's willing to take calculated risk. 3, someone who is high on confidence. And 4, it was also about someone who would, take the team along. I think these were really critical, because that's how you build credibility. And once a person was able to do that and take the team along, I think he was really successful. So a lot came by his confidence and what he had proved himself in the previous years as well. But I think, and that's what we mean by proactive, because someone who's typically in a delivery role, as a project manager or as a project, even as a director, right? Going and setting up an organization in a different country is a completely different skill, because it involves business development, it involves compliance, it involves so many other aspects, not just your, program delivery. For someone to do that, I think that sort of displays why that proactiveness sort of, propelled him to where he was.
See, if he became a VP at 12 years, he would have overtaken a lot of people.
Yes.
I'm sure he had people who are same age or a little elder
Absolutely.
were reporting to him. How did he handle himself there?
Yes, people definitely did have issues with that. People definitely will feel, I've heard people say that myself, right? Saying that, oh, we used to be peers and so on. But I think sometimes you've just got to accept it. And, the person, as I said, one is the competency of the person, which always comes through, right? And people respect you for what you bring into the organization. Nobody stopped others. The only thing is, these may be, grievances or issues that people will hold internally, but doesn't really come out, because, they have seen what he can bring to the table. So that's always appreciated, right? When someone, and it's happened many, for example, I had a boss who was 2 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And initially it was very hard for me to accept it. I'll be very open, right? I was like, oh my God, the person's younger than me, and I've not heard of it at all. I'm like, how does this happen? But then the guy was really, really smart, to the extent that I was like, I'm so glad I have a boss like that, because he's really smart. He could just get onto the issues like this. He could just help me out wherever. And then I think that age doesn't really become the barrier. Instead, it becomes, the competencies and skills that the person brings in. So you just like get over it, and you're like, that's perfectly fine. We are still friends today. He's in Australia. Of course, he's branched completely out. He's become a doctor today and whatnot. But he's someone who I always respect, though he was younger than me, and he was my boss.
How, I mean, when you said he's smarter, what way? Can you explain a little bit?
Just his approach, to problem solving. There were a lot of things that I could learn from him. Even with my 3-4 years of experience, I think I had a lot to learn from him. There was a lot that I looked up to, especially his whole style of being very systematic about things, his relationship, how he was able to build stakeholder relationships. And there were so many other factors and traits which I was able to look up to. And, he was on top of everything. You go ask him a particular thing, he will just be on top of it. I would probably be looking at my diary and pages to see, where the status is and whatnot. He would just be on top of everything. Anytime a partner asked him, he would have the answer there. Similarly, he was someone who would just go in with his views, be able to talk to people about it, have a completely, different perspective and so on. Now, these were all things that I really learned from him. And so the age really didn't matter. And, and from then on, I always felt that, in fact, even in my last job, my boss was only 1 year. There was only 1 year difference, right? But that was never an issue for me. Because I know, what are the competencies the person brings to the table. So that definitely sees through. I think, and it also brings up your maturity level as an individual, right? I think as you sort of grow, that also comes into
So
play.
when you talked about competences, do you also imply the behavioral competences?
I'm talking about everything: behavioral competencies, leadership competencies, functional competencies. It could be anything that, that could work there.
Okay. Yes, yes,
So,
Damodaran, yeah.
Yes, Divya, there is statement, like our behavior is a function of our perception, correct? Okay.
yes.
Whether employee should being asked to trust their own perceptions, or if someone has wrong thinking about job or about person, how do you change that?
See, you cannot stop people from having perceptions. It is bound to happen, and it's natural that all of us will have perceptions. Um, it takes a lot to change perceptions. It can be changed, but it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of effort to be able to change perceptions. One of the ways that I've been able to do in my work is where we had a products group. Again, the perception of the leadership in the products group was probably not the best, right? And then we had a change in leadership as well, and we had to sort of, you can see the comments that come through, and so on. And then it took at least a good 6-month effort to change that perception, and it was about chipping, block by block. So one is, how do you earn their trust? And again, it can, and when we're talking about building trust, when we're talking about changing perceptions, it's got to be something that's consistent. So what we did was we got the leader out in front of the people more often, ensuring that there was at least a quarterly town hall that was happening, so that they get to hear from the leader directly. They get to ask questions of the leader directly. Again, then you had your small informal connects where you had the directors reach out to their skip level people, and we called it 5 by 5 by 5, which is like every fifth day they meet 5 people, at 5 p.m., take them out for a tea and just have an informal chat, right? So there were so many of these programs that we put in place to get the leadership out in front of people, to start having those dialogues which are not restricted to a town hall, to a very formal setting. And then once you sort of start having those more frequent conversations with people and so on, there is much more transparency. There's a whole lot of trust, and when you see what is being told being put into action. For example, right, I told you we spoke about a products practice. There was a bit of disengagement there and so on, which then meant that we had to obviously ring fence those people, because they are a products group, which is again hard for us to go and source in the market, which then meant if we are promising that we'll take care of you, we've got to put a plan in action, and people have to see that translate into action as well. So and which is why I said, so while we were tackling compensation on one side, we had to look at engagement on the other side, we had to look at communication on the third side, right? So it was a three-pronged approach. And even if one of them had failed, the perception again can go back to where it was. So it is important to be consistent in that. It is not easy. It is, if something goes wrong, it can again fall back. So, which is why, I think the transparency and consistency becomes very important when you're changing it. And two, I think people are intelligent enough if you rationalize with them and show them, why certain things are done the way they are, and which is what I meant by transparency, because I may have a perception. I told you about my case, right, where I took a case and it fell flat. So the immediate perception was that, it's not for my unit, it doesn't happen. For someone else's unit means it's fine. That's a perception. It's very easy to fall into that trap of discrimination, like, that person's a favorite, I'm not a favorite, and hence it's done. But I think once you sort of engage in that dialogue, make it, this is the reason why this is done, make it more transparent, then I think it's easier to change the perception. Again, by no means can it happen overnight, but it's got to be consistent.
You mentioned this Australia people are more candid. Would you say they are more transparent?
More, sorry, Ravi?
They are more
More
transparent,
trustworthy.
more candid, and more relatively. This factor, the perception management, is lot more effective there. Is it like that? I don't know.
No. See, again, trust is something which is very personal. So, while they're very candid, while they're very, I wouldn't necessarily say transparent. They're very candid. But I think it pretty much is the same across, you would find people who you can trust. You would find people who are a little dodgy. You will find people where it's really hard to trust. I don't think that really differs by country to country. Mm-hmm. I think it just depends on the individual and the relationship with individuals. I've had both types of people in both countries. I've had people who I can really trust in India and in Australia. I've had people who I just can't trust, both in Australia and in India. They may be giving very candid comments to me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there could be, feelings of insecurity and whatever creep in as well, which mm-hmm. they will not be so nice to tell you, right? So,
can you give an example? I mean, you don't mention names. Just we want to know the background. How unpredictable people were here as well as there.
No, for example, in Australia, when I worked with one of the people here, I knew that I was reporting into her initially, and then I sort of became her peer. And while there was nothing outwardly said to me, right, it was always a good relationship outwardly, but you just knew that there is that slight feeling of distrust that you don't really share things as you would do to a peer. There's a lot of information that you hold back. Which typically as peers you would be sharing.
So they are candid or they are very polite or both?
No, so they candid when it comes to certain things. I think when it comes to a reporting relationship, probably it's more candid. But again, I don't think I can generalize, Ravi, between Australia and India. I think it can exist anywhere, any organization. So I think it would be wrong on my part to generalize, saying that, in Australia, they're very candid, you can trust. In India, you can't, because I think it just depends on the individuals. Like I said, I've had experiences both sides, so I mean, even in India, I had someone, who I was working with, and you could just sense that insecurity, right? That, if the person would just do it,
what are the indicators of the insecurity?
See, typically it becomes when when they don't want you to sort of go out to the business and reach on your own. So good leaders will. I always tell this to my team. I tell them the mark of a good leader is to make their role redundant. Mm-hmm. Okay, which basically means the team is capable of taking on my role and running with it, right? Today, if I'm not there, I don't have to worry. My team will take and run with it. And that is a mark of a good leader. The minute I think that, oh my God, my team is growing, now what happens to my role? I think that by itself will not work. In my, at least people who I've seen and what I really look up to, that's where my belief comes from. The role of a leader is a good leader if they're able to make their job redundant. And, so sometimes you see that, when information is being withheld, where it can actually help another person grow, then that's really not an environment that you want to be in. That doesn't really work. Somewhere that trust then, breaks down.
Okay.
And it does happen. It does happen in many organizations. and I'm sure all of us would have gone through it, whether we are within the academic area or corporate or wherever it does happen.
Can you talk about a boss or some colleague or somebody who was completely trustworthy or completely in tune with you can transparent? Can you talk about somebody who on the positive side?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had, luckily, touch wood, I've had most of my bosses who've been absolutely trustworthy. I'll go back to Cognizant because I spent close to 4.5 years there, and the level of trust that I shared with my boss and with my peers, to this day, we remain the best of friends. So it's like that. You could say whatever you want, knowing very well that it's never going to be taken personally. All the conversations are conversations which revolve around what is best for the business. Absolutely diametrically opposite views that we've had on many occasions. But then it's always been healthy conversations that we've had. As I said, I think we were 4 people who were looking in 4 different directions. But then, and then, what sort of conversations we can have, because each one has their own view. Each one comes in with that amount of experience, exposure, etc., etc. But I think the mark of it is that having those healthy conversations and trying to see what is required for that situation, setting aside your ego and whatever. And 2, that is never ever going to harm the relationship that you share with that individual on a personal level, or even at a professional level, because it's only a conversation that you're having. It's only views that you're sharing. It's only trying to use each other as a sounding board and get done with it. 3, you just know that the person will cover for you no matter what. I don't think, as much as we've had our differences, every time we had a review meeting, it would be the 4 of us who would sit down together, and never will we let down each other in any of the review meetings. It would just be that we are one, we present one face, and that's it. So whatever it is, we all 4 will take it on. Whether we have to face the brunt, then that's fine. We will still do it. Or we have to share credit, we would still do it. And that's how all our review meetings happened as well. Each one would have their own, time to present a part of the review, and each one would pitch in for the other, including client meetings and so on. There are so many of the client meetings where I pitched in for my colleague, my colleagues pitched in for me, if we weren't able to make it, and so on. So I think those, it's very, very special that way.
Okay.
Or even coming back to Sacks of Days, Ravi. We used to work 7 days a week, but it never really felt like work. You had someone who was willing to take on learning and development, even if they were doing recruitment. You had someone who was willing to take on talent management, even if they were doing learning and development. I think that's the sort of trust that you build.
Divya, there is a phrase, beauty lies in the beholder. Have you come across this in your real-time experience? Please share.
It's a bit of a philosophical thing for me, when you say beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, because the way I like to visualize that is presented to you, right? You can look at an opportunity as an opportunity, or you can look at it as something that's thrust upon you. To me, the way I view it is, yes, it lies in the eyes of the beholder, but then it's important for a leader to be able to also try and show the team or the associate what could possibly be the other side as well. So I think that's what's important. For example, when I had to take on capability development, I don't think I was really enthused by it, to be honest. To me, it was like, oh my God, I'm really not a facilitator, and that's the tangent I was going on, because I was asked to take capability development for BFS and say that each of us had our own HR business partnering role, but then we had to take on an additional portfolio as well. For example, someone would take compensation benefits, someone would take capability development, someone would take engagement, and so on. Now, I don't think I was really enthused by it till, and to me it was like, oh my God, do I really have to do it? Is there nothing else that I can do? Which is when I think we had that conversation around what can it possibly be, and what is it that you can do in that space, and why do you think it's important? How will it help the business, and so on. So I think in the initial way, if I have to say beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, I was like, it was ugly to me. I didn't want to take it up. But then I think after it was shown to me that these could be the different avenues, these were all the different things, then it became beautiful, to the extent that I did that for 4 years. And I was very proud that I picked up capability development, built DevOps practice, an agile practice, or help the business, build those communities of practice, do work with the architecture team and so on. I think then that changed it completely. So I think at times it's important for someone else to show it if you're not able to see it as well. And then it's up to the individual to finally make a choice. But I think as a leader, there's that extra onus on them to be able to show the other side.
Thank you. So you have vast HR experience. Please share any interesting motivational technique which you have applied for your employees.
If I have to talk about, a motivational technique, whether it's for my team, I can speak about my team because, I have been involved in doing it, or, what I've seen in the business as well. I think primarily, if you're able to understand the aspirations of your team and map it with the roles that the team has to play, then you're setting up yourself and the team for success. And what I mean by this is, for example, I'll take my own case. Like I told you, I was offered capability development. I was offered engagement. I was offered one more thing, as my extra portfolio. Knowing me, if I had to pick up, let's say, an engagement, I don't think I would have really enjoyed it. And I don't think that's really where my strength lies. My strength probably lies more in business partnering and other things. So when we went through a restructuring, and there was this opportunity of you becoming an engagement partner versus you being a HR business partner, I think I knew where my strengths were, my boss knew where my strengths were, and then being able to map it accordingly, that really helped. If I was put in the other role, I don't think I would have existed in the organization for a longer time. I would have left long back. Similarly, even if I have to look at my own team, I think there are people who are extremely, analytical, who love their spreadsheets, who love their data, and, who love design and so on. So, you would typically want to put them in, in an analytics job, or, a compensation job, strategy job. Design, you would want them to start looking at developing solutions, design of solutions, rather than putting them into an engagement, people-facing front, client-facing role. So I think that way, when we had to rejig the team a bit, because there are those times where you can see that bit of ebb hitting people. So I think being able to understand the aspirations of people and mapping them to those particular roles definitely do help. When we're talking about how to motivate individuals, and it's natural, when you're in a particular role for 2+ years, there is bound to be some disengagement, and which is where it will need a bit of a shake-up. But as I said, if they probably put me in something which I'm just not strong at or inclined, very, very high chance that, I would have left the organization long back. And this happens in the business as well. You have people who really want to get into technology, into an architect role, and you put them in the day-to-day coding. You may not be able to hold them for a long time. And then when we did this whole program around building architects internally, these were the people who you shortlist, who you train, people who express their interest, people who have the capability to pick that up as well. So you do that, then, they may still be getting the same salary, not that, the salary is going to increase, but then there's the joy that, they're doing something that they really want to do. And which is why you also see a lot of the organizations have now become very open, to advertising jobs internally and letting people experiment. For example, I can move from a HR business partner role into a compensation role. And in fact, in one organization, I was given an agile coach role. And I said, look, all that I know about agile is, the agile methodology basics. That's all I know. I don't know anything else. And the business told me, no, we've seen you work as a HR business partner. We know what you bring to the table. We will teach you all the technical aspects. You don't have to worry. Just attend an interview with our client. If the client is fine, we'll take you on board. The client was fine. They said that, we are all good. You can join us as an agile coach. But I didn't have the guts to pick it up, to be honest. But I think organizations have become much more open to sort of, experiment such things and get people, at least try out what they're interested. They become a little more risk-taking, I must say. And that's something that we always encourage. It's very hard to find 100% fit. As long as you think there's a 70%, that's okay. Take the 30% risk and groom them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You want to ask anything, or we will? Yeah. Damodaran? No, you have to unmute.
Unmute your mic.
There is a question actually. Do you feel any challenge when you deal with a person who has got low self-efficacy?
Low self-efficacy, absolutely. It's.
Have you any experience with those people?
I think it happens in pockets. With at different times. It has. You do work with such people, and it's very hard to. And sometimes you just have to take the approach of this is it. You've got to accept it, right? And sometimes reasoning does help, but not all times. And I'm being very candid here, right? So when you have such, if you're having someone at a slightly senior level where you think there is high potential, it's just that it's more to do with low self-esteem and whatever. Then coaching, mentoring, and all that will help. At junior levels, it might just have to be a performance improvement plan. You put them on it, and they either pick up their game, change stuff themselves. You help them do it, else they will have to be managed out. So I think you come across both situations. Of course, you do come across such people more often. I think low self-esteem can still be managed because you can. If you're in a position where you're able to mentor them or coach them and provide them those opportunities, all that takes is one success, one win for them to, do well. But if it's about their whole efficiency itself, then I think, it becomes a little harder.
Thank you. This will be the last question of mine. When someone who criticizes the work, should we take as a learning, or should we respond them?
Okay. Now, if I have to be very, very honest, right? I think
it's happening everywhere. That's why I asked you.
Now, when I don't know, the best way to look at it is as feedback. Okay. If someone's criticizing your work, the best way to look at it is as feedback. But I'll just put one small caveat there. It's a feedback, but then, you need to be comfortable with the feedback. Sometimes, you've got to trust your gut. Not all feedback is correct feedback. So you've got to take the feedback, but take the feedback with a pinch of salt. That's the way I would probably look at it. I think earlier for me, I would go and ask for feedback. It was like, give me feedback. And then, you want to be like able to change. But then I think over the years, you've come to realize that, people are different, the understanding of the issue is different. And so always take the feedback, but then apply your sensibilities into it to see if that feedback makes sense. If you think it makes sense, work on it. If you feel very strongly it does not make sense, then be able to rationalize even to yourself to say, why you did the way you did, right? And many times I tell people, even though there are perceptions, those perceptions still have to be addressed. So, if there is a feedback, it may not have to be direct. You don't have to immediately go and argue with them about it and say, this is what it is, blah, blah, blah. But I think you should be able to rationalize to yourself and to the other individual if you don't agree with the feedback. But I think any feedback is feedback. Just take it with a pinch of salt, apply your own sensibilities and rationalities to it to see if that feedback works for you or not.
Thank you. Let's see.
I think that's how I've done it. As I said, this is
let me apply
after
it.
a few gray hairs that that I'm saying this. I wouldn't have said that, and I don't even know if it's the right thing to tell people. But I just believe in being candid. This is work for me.
Okay. I hand it over to some other professors who are.
Dr. Rajini, you want to ask anything?
It.
I think we have taken a lot of time. Rajini.
Okay. No. I 10% agree with what Divya has said. Whatever feedback, I consider it as a positive criticism and negative criticism. Whatever is good for you, you take and you improve your performance. Absolutely correct. I agree with you in that.
Thank you.
A wonderful session, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much.